Yo, check out this video if you've been struggling getting a job, and if you haven't done your hobbies in a while. I read a whole book this morning. Just woke up super early. Sometimes you just wake up early because you have a lot of stuff going on and you're thinking about a lot, but yeah, it was really great. I read a book and I realized how much I miss reading books, but I've just been so busy with life and I'm trying to get ahead that I've neglected some of my favorite hobbies, you know. And yeah, so it was interesting. I was reading a book and my takeaways and what I learned from that book was basically he talked a lot about being different than everyone else, and how if we unlearn a lot of the things that we know to be true. He had interesting illustration where he had like a crap ton of bricks on a seesaw, and that's everything that we know, our truths, like what we believe to be true about life and society and people and our point of views, and how certain we want to be about it, and how when we unlearn something, we try to hear another person's perspective that's completely different than ours, it goes to the right side a little bit more, and the goal is to be at a balance. So don't forget everything and be completely different than who you are, but just try to understand another person's perspective that might be like completely different than yours. So I thought that was a really good illustration. But yeah, back to interviewing. So it's been close to almost 2 months on this job search journey, and honestly, definitely probably tied for the longest I've ever had to search for a job, and probably the most stressful, I would say, just because you know, it's hard to not think about and tie your worth into your job and your career. Like, so much of our society and even outside of societal expectations, like even for myself, like I'm someone that prides himself on being productive, being a contributing member of society. And you know, I used to think things like unemployment, people who collect unemployment are just like pieces of shits. But it's funny because this is the first time I've been on the other end, and I still, you know, I just filed for my first week of unemployment, so it's not like I've been quote unquote mooching off the government for that long. But anyways, it's been interesting. I feel like you learn more about yourself when you fail, and you know, I wouldn't necessarily call this a failure, but when you're in transition and when you're trying to figure stuff out, you learn more about yourself than when everything's gravy, the economy's great, you're making a crap ton of money. You're not growing as much, you know. And I think human beings, we look back at these memories, you know, some of the most successful people in the world I know have gone through a lot of adversity, a lot of challenges, and on the outside it may seem that they have it all, but really I was listening to Alex Hormozi getting interviewed by Tom Bilyeu, who are both pretty wealthy and probably will be billionaires at some point, both of them. If not, they're already there. They're worth at least hundreds of millions. He interviewed Alex Hormozi, and he did a study on what are some of the habits of the most successful people in the world. And number one, they have this innate like vision that they know that they're destined for greatness. Like, they just know deep down in their heart, and they just, for whatever reason, think that they can create something that will literally fundamentally change the world as we know it. And then on the opposite side, and this is where the paradox is they are deeply insecure. Like, they need validation, they need to prove to themselves, they need to be the best. And the third part is delayed gratification, and he gave the marshmallow example, which is overplayed at this point, but I'll just share it with you anyways. It's this is a super famous study that keeps getting recited by a lot of different people, but essentially they did a study where children who were given the choice between getting one marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows if they waited 15 or 30 minutes. I think it's like 15 you get 2 marshmallows, and 30 minutes you get 3 marshmallows, right? The ones that were able to wait longer just ended up being more quote unquote successful in life. And yeah, that's the third trait. And that's this really fascinating concept, right? So Tom goes, he's like, yeah, I'm extremely good at waiting. I could wait a month for that marshmallow because I know that will eventually be 10,000 marshmallows one day, right? And I would say I'm definitely the first two. I definitely embody some of those traits, but the last part, delayed gratification, is definitely the hardest for me. Although, you know, I am building a lot of assets and I have no doubt I will be successful. But impulse control, okay, he summarized it by calling it impulse control. I could definitely improve on my impulse control, and we all have things that we're working on, right? So none of us are perfect. But that was an interesting concept. I would argue, you know, there's some people who live for the moment and eat the marshmallow, and I would argue that sometimes in moderation that's a happier way to live life, right? I read this book called Die with Zero, and it's a guy named Bill Perkins who wrote it. Super amazing book, would highly recommend it. But in the book, basically he writes about the concept of, he thinks that many people wait until they're about to die to hand off, well, this is not he thinks, it's actually a fact. Most people wait until they die to hand their inheritance to their kids instead of giving it to them when they most need it the most, right? So let's say you live to like 78. Well, when your kid is like 21 to 30, that they're not making as much usually, right? They you know, whether they want to start their own business venture or buy their first home, they need that money a lot more, right? So the goal is to die with zero in the book. So his argument is that instead of giving them like one lump sum, let's say it's $5 million to your, you know, let's say you have an only child, right? He's, you know, by the time he gets that, let's say he's, you know, you live to 78, you had the kid at 24. So let's say he's 54, like he's not going to need that money as much because that's when they're peaking. They've already made most of their money. They've already had career success, as opposed to when you're 21 and you're like barely can even afford ramen noodles, like, you know what I mean? So, or better yet, you know, when you're 35 and, you know, you're purchasing your first home, or you just, you know, you have all this debt from whatever business venture or going to medical school, whatever it is, right? You need that a lot more. So super interesting book, check it out. And yeah, share with me what interesting books you guys have read lately. Hope this caused you guys to think a little bit differently. Cheers.